Good evening. My name is Larry Beals. I'm with Beals Associates, and we'd like to thank you for joining us this evening for our rollout of a project located at 1 and 101 Main Street. We'd much prefer to do this in person and have an interactive meeting where we could see each other and exchange ideas. But this is the next best thing. And so we've put together this virtual meeting. What we'd like to accomplish tonight is run through a slide deck and show you our vision for the property. And then more importantly, we'd like to get to your questions and comments and try to respond to them as best we can. Before we get into the slide deck, I'd like to introduce the owner of the property, David Crane, and he will explain his relationship and his vision for the property. David.
Thank you, Larry. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Crane. I'm the regional director here in Boston for my company is called DWS. We're a global asset management company. Our real estate arm, as many of us know us as REEF. That's our legacy name. We have 3,000 or 4,000 employees, very large company. We've owned Riverfront since 2004. So I've been involved with the project for over 15 years. It's one of our largest assets that we own and one of our most important. We love Cambridge. We love being a part of the fabric of the community. And we're very excited to share our concept tonight. Just so you know, DWS, again, is a global management company. We invest essentially, our clients are pension fund clients. So it's city and state public workers, firefighters, police. They like the pie chart where 10% or so of their investments go into alternatives, and we offer that product solution to them for the investment. We invest in office, industrial, retail, and apartments here in the US and are considered a very large national institutional investor. And we're very happy with our Cambridge property. It's one of our most important assets. We like being part of the community, and we look forward to sharing our plans. So I'll turn it back to Larry to go through the details.
Thank you, Dave. And the reason we're shuffling back and forth is we're trying to maintain distance between us and we're incapable of making a presentation wearing a mask. So you may get used to musical chairs throughout the evening. Before we get into the slide deck, I just want to take care of some housekeeping items. And this presentation will be recorded, and the recording will be made available on our co-urbanized website, which the link to that is www.buildbroadcanal.com. And so if you're on the meeting, you probably have that link already. If you'd like to ask a question, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type your question into the Q&A box and click send. That will send the question to us, and we will address the questions we receive. As panelists, I'm considered a panelist. We'll not be able to see who sent the question, or we will be able to see who sent the question, but other attendees will not. So there's a certain amount of anonymity here. You may submit a question at any time, and we'll strive to answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time, we'll post responses to all remaining questions online with the recording. So with that out of the way, please, the main purpose of this meeting is to explain the project, but much more importantly is to receive your questions and comments. So Brian, if we could go to the next slide.
I forgot to introduce my colleague who's working on this project with me, Tanya Damiano, who's a key part of our team. I work on the project day to day. Tanya's bigger picture, looking at the development potential and what we can do to enhance the value of our long-term investment here. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine, Brian. And the person you're not seeing right now is Brian Sutherland, because he's in front of the computer screen making everything work. So if it doesn't work, you'll know who to blame. Just for a quick orientation, what DWS owns are the two brick towers in the center of the picture. And the Tower on the right-hand side is 1 Main Street. The tower on the left-hand side is 101 Main Street, and they're connected with a parking structure between the two. What you can see in the background in the beige color is the power plant, and then the dark surface next to the building is the broad canal, which is one of the main features of this site that we're going to explore with you tonight. So for orientation, this slide shows our property in the dark blue. You can see it's really one of the gateways to Cambridge. As you come over the Longfellow Bridge from Boston, one of the very first buildings you see on the right-hand side of Main Street is 1 and 101 Main Street. We're right in the heart of Kendall Square, which is a very active, vibrant area. There's a lot of research and development, and there's been a lot of redevelopment with activation for people that live and work in the area. So we'll start to zoom in on more specifics. East Cambridge is to the north of us, and we're separated from the residential neighborhoods by a considerable distance, but it's a factor that we are taking into consideration. As I mentioned earlier, this building in some respects is a gateway to Cambridge. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the Longfellow Bridge in the background, our 2 towers in the foreground. The building was built in 1985 under a planned unit development, and it was actually special permit number 1. So these buildings are about a generation old, and they were built at a time when Kendall Square was substantially different than it was today. When these buildings were built, it was risky to build buildings of this size in this location. So they were done by the original developers somewhat economically. There's not a lot of interest in the architecture. They're somewhat monolithic with the ribbon windows. And we think that there are tremendous opportunities to place a new tower between these 2 existing towers. Because they're so plain, it's an opportunity to really do a signature type building. So we're in the zoning district PUD3. Currently, office space with some ground floor retail is what exists on the property. And what we find really interesting, and this is what we want to reverse in this whole process, is that this is a waterfront project, but it really turned its back on the underutilized Broad Canal. If you're from the area, if you've been to this area, you know that there's been some revitalization of the Broad Canal with the kayak center and the boat launch. We'll go to the next one. In order to redevelop and do the things we'd like to do on this site, we need to rezone it. And the purpose of this outreach is to get comments from the people that may live or work or go through the area. We're interested in what you have to say, but what we're proposing for the zoning text amendment is to have a maximum base height of 200 feet, but not to exceed 350 feet. I think I said 200, I meant 250 feet, but not to exceed 350 feet. To expand the building, we need additional density, and we're looking for a maximum on the site of 1.4 million square feet. Currently, there's 815,000 square feet. It's fully occupied. It's 100% leased. So we're looking to add the difference, or about 600,000 square feet at this location. We've also suggested some zoning amendments that allow clinical uses. In some of the other buildings and projects that DWS has, that's been a welcome use on some of the sites. The acute care facilities, or dock in the box, I think they're commonly called. And we also want to supplement the zoning to allow canal uses, kayaking, and we'll illustrate some of those uses that we're proposing later on. We've worked with the planning staff at City Hall. They've explained parking maximums to us, and we're proposing maximums to the parking that's being allowed. We're going to achieve the comparable of an LED Gold certification, LEED, LEED Gold. And a lot of the zoning that we're proposing is comparable to other zoning changes that have recently occurred in this area. So it seems to be somewhat comparable and compatible. Again, for orientation, the building on the right that's labeled 01 is the 1 Main Street. The building on the far left, you just jumped. The building on the far left is 101 Main, and then the building that we're proposing in the middle is, we're currently referring to it as 51 Main Street. If somebody has a more clever name, we're all ears. In the blue on the above the existing buildings is the Broad Canal. And what this site plan shows is the existing boardwalk that runs along the northern part of the canal. Where the laser pointer is right now is the kayak launch. And then we're proposing a bridge across the canal, pedestrian bridge, because it's a great way to get people out over the water that may not be interested in getting into a kayak or a canoe. But you picture a beautiful summer day standing on that bridge over the Broad Canal would be a nice experience. And you can see that we're trying to connect that link around the Broad Canal. We're also trying to connect into everything going on to the left of this drawing with the MIT developments and redevelopments. We're illustrating landscaping, which is an important element in the revitalization of this area. And anyone that has any other ideas or suggestions, I should preface our comments by saying these are all conceptual. So we have no pride of authorship. If there's something you really like, we'd like to hear it. If there's something you don't like, we'd like to hear that as well. Let's go to the next one. As I said earlier, this was a pioneering building. It took some courage to build this building at the time because of the market conditions. So it's fairly plain. In some respects, it's reminiscent of more suburban architecture where we've got a parking deck and then the building in the background. We think there's a lot that we can do on Main Street. Let's go to the next one. So we've taken that same photograph and marked it up a little bit, showing how this ground level of the project could really be activated, so that we've, if you look in the foreground, you can see people open air dining. I think before the pandemic, we would have thought this was a crazy idea to be that close to traffic, but this seems to be very commonplace these days. And then we've added shops and cafes and retail space along the ground floor. And if you look into the center of this photo, you'll see a sort of a blue box that says Broad Canal on one side, or Broad and Canal on the other side. And we're proposing to open that up and allow people to move from Main Street directly to the Broad Canal. Right now, if you were to walk down Main Street, I think most people not familiar with the area would have no idea that Broad Canal is on the other side of the building. So we want to use that to draw people over to the Broad Canal. In planning this, we sort of viewed it as a mini Rose Wharf, if you're familiar with that building, where on Atlantic Avenue, it's a much grander scale, but it invites you to go over to the waterfront. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with that. As we said, the building seems to have turned its back onto the Broad Canal. There's a very beautiful, nice, functional boardwalk on the right-hand side of this image. And there's a lot of activity on that. And I've been up and down that a number of times, and it's a very pleasant place to walk. If you look on the 1 Main Street side, the canal really doesn't have any ground level activation. And that's our goal, is to really turn that into a much more vibrant, pedestrian friendly, user friendly area. And so we've touched up, we've used some precedent images. We haven't designed it yet, but these are other successful areas, abutting canals where there's a use of awnings and plant materials and tables and chairs. And it can really, if you think back to the prior slide to this slide, this is the type of place that really invites you to come in. If you look in the upper picture, in the lower right-hand corner of the upper picture, you see a yellow boat. And so one of our proposals in this zoning amendment is to allow us to actually put a boat into the canal with the use as a restaurant or a bar, maybe a bar on the upper deck and a restaurant on the lower deck. But we think that that could be a pretty interesting experience, again, on a beautiful night, sitting out in the open air on a boat in the Broad Canal, eating dinner. I think could turn this almost into a destination, someplace worth going in the evening. And we like that concept because the canal originally was intended for commerce, and putting a boat into the canal with a restaurant and a bar would be adding back commerce to the Broad Canal once again. Many of you may know this, but the Broad Canal was originally constructed to bring goods and services and boats and barges from the Charles River into East Cambridge. And so on the upper drawing is a historic drawing of what the Broad Canal looked like years ago when it was used for these purposes. And then we show in the lower left-hand corner other images of the Broad Canal showing that over the years it's been neglected. And we've thought that there's a tremendous historic resource here also, and that we would like to incorporate into the ground level activation either a walking tour or plaques or information that can explain to people exactly what the Broad Canal has been used for at least a century or more. In terms of the building that we're proposing, these are two images of a tower being located where there is currently a parking garage. So if you look at the left-hand drawing, the 101 Main Street is in the foreground, 1 Main Street is in the background, and you can see sort of a blue glassy tower in the middle. We're interested in your comments on architecture, but this architecture has not been finalized. And the purpose of this is to express the concept, the height, the mass. And we've had a number of suggestions on what should be done in terms of the architecture in this center. Dennis Carlone, one of the city councilors, actually provided us with the Volpe design guidelines, and we're reviewing those to see how we can incorporate them onto this site. And then the image on the right-hand side of this slide shows the Broad Canal and the tower next to it. One thing that we are concerned about is the bike lane in front of the building. It's confusing, and I think it presents an opportunity to really improve this. DWS owns all the frontage, and so that gives us the added advantage of maybe considering design options that can make the bike path safer and more functional. So I've been over there at night. I've seen cars that are confused driving down it. So we see this as a real plus for both improving pedestrian traffic and safety. We're also encouraged and planning to include environmentally friendly, a green roof, solar generation, charging stations for electric vehicles. In terms of planning, we're probably over planning because we believe in the future there'll be pretty big demand for electric vehicles. We want to make sure we have the infrastructure to accommodate that. We've given a lot of thought to affordable housing. We've discussed it with the planning staff. We've discussed it with city councilors. And where we have concluded is that this isn't a particularly great site for affordable housing, given the nature of all the surrounding land uses. And rather than creating affordable housing within this office complex, our perspective is we would be far better off contributing to affordable housing so it could be located and constructed and used in areas that are perhaps more appropriate for residential use and for affordable housing use. We have a lot of suggestions. We have a long list of opportunities to explore, but right now for this project, we're viewing affordable housing as a contribution as opposed to embedding it into the office tower. So as I said, we wanted to be brief. I could actually talk for 4 or 5 more hours if you were interested, but in all sincerity, the most important aspect of this presentation this evening is to hear whatever questions or comments the people watching us may have. Thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry if I bored you a bit, but I've been working with Dave on this project for about 15 years, so we have a lot to say about it.
So our first question is from Alex Levering. Could you explain the max base height again? I'm confused how the max base height is 250 feet, but the not to exceed height is 350. Thanks.
Okay. So great question. And we're not absolutely certain what, and that may be, we probably need to rephrase that. That's the one useful purpose of your question, is that we need to rephrase that so we're a little bit more clear. The building that we show right now is the 250-foot height. And the zoning text amendment that we have written allows, is proposed to go up to 350 feet. We need to be very cautious with that. And we've talked to some of the city councilors because as the building gets bigger, the mitigation gets more substantial. And the advice we've gotten is be very careful about what you ask for, because you'll create mitigation proportional to the height and density of this project. So right now we're at a flexible stage. We haven't designed the building. We don't know what the final height is. But if you could picture that building that you see in the photograph right now, if you added maybe 50% to that, there's been some debate about how tall this building should be. And there are some people, not on our team, but on the city staff, that say this would be an ideal spot for a real signature building, the gateway to Cambridge. It's an identifier of Main Street. So I guess what we're trying to communicate on that one bullet point is that it's probably going to be a minimum of 200 feet high and a maximum of 350 feet high. That's the proposal at the present time.
Next question from Heather Hoffman. Between Alexandria's Met Pipe project, Biomed's Not Constellation Center project, and Boston Properties requested additional 800,000 square feet connected to the Eversource substation, and your project proposed here, this would make nearly 3 million square feet of commercial development in Kendall Square, the grand total of 0 square footage of residential construction. East Cambridge, Wellington, Harrington, and the port are being squeezed and gentrified like there's no tomorrow. The current incentive zoning contributions to the Affordable Housing Trust are significantly below the amount that the Nexus study found would be needed to offset the residential demand of commercial construction. Why is this a good deal for those of us who keep suffering the downside while developers keep lining their pockets?
Well, that's why we're rolling out this. That's why we're presenting it, is to understand your perspective on this. We're still in the initial design stages, and why is it a good opportunity for the residents? we're trying to take that broad canal area and activate it. And we've tried to keep a list here. Let me just go through a couple of the items that we think are fairly important. Architecture I've already mentioned as signifying the gateway to Cambridge. And if you're living in the area, the activation of the ground level along Main Street and Broad Canal, we want to do an inviting space for all demographics. And some of the city councilors have said, you know, we don't want another group of high-priced restaurants. We want restaurants where a family of four, or a family can go and have a good meal at a very reasonable price. We've suggested adding the pedestrian cut-through connecting Main Street to Broad Canal, public visitor center. An important factor that we're adding to this project is public restrooms. And it's been suggested that we should add public space on the ground level that's environmentally controlled. So if it's a hot summer day, there's a place to get out of the sun and out of the humidity in this space. And by the same token, on a cold winter's night, there's a place to go indoors to get warmed up. We'd like to move the kayak business into the building so it has a permanent home. We'd like to implement some youth programs along the water. We've talked about crew kayaking, high school teams. I'm just trying to hit the highlight off the list here. My personal favorites, the boat and the restaurant, the floating bar in the canal. We've talked about perhaps making this the launching point for a Cambridge historic trail. There is a landing on the Charles River. I believe it's called Poor Man's Landing, that is currently in a state of disrepair. We'd like to improve that and at our cost to make it more access to the water at that location. We've talked about a broad canal restoration and maintenance, a full-scale cleanup of the canal, regular cleaning of the Broad Canal, water circulation system in the Broad Canal, improving pedestrian and traffic safety, environmentally friendly initiatives. And having worked with the city council, I know that the city council will be very deliberative and will insist on mitigation, and the mitigation will be appropriate for this project. And with that mitigation, a lot of good can be done with the community, but that's up to the city council to figure out how that money is going to be spent.
As a follow-up, Heather asks, is there really a market for this much more commercial space given the current change in where people work and the uncertain prospects for where people will work in the future?
Well, I'll try to add to that. I'll try to address that, and I'll let Dave chime in because he owns the building and he's much more familiar with the leasing. But this is Kendall Square, and there are so many good things going on in Kendall Square right now that our assessment is that's going to continue. You know, it's MIT, it's all the biotech, and we work with many of these companies in many communities across the Commonwealth. So there's a couple of things. One is, this isn't a tremendous, I think the footprint's about 14 or 15,000 square feet. So this will be more of an office support for the biotech industry. But so far, the studies that we've done have indicated that there will be demand for this. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say from a long-term perspective, we're just believers in Kendall Square, not just because the vaccine's getting created down the street, but we've had our building 100% leased for the last few years. We have tenants clamoring for more space. It's an ideal location for companies looking to have that Kendall Square presence. And whether it happens in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be patient and wait for the right opportunity. But I hear your point about space utilization that could be changing, but I'm hearing a lot of the big tech companies are going to be back in the offices by June or July, and we'll have to see how things shake out. But from a long-term perspective, we're just believers in this community and in the neighborhood of Cambridge, in East Cambridge particularly.
Todd Glickman asks, the beauty of the broad canal is marred by the sights and sounds of the power plant on the north side. What thoughts do you have on this challenge?
Well, we have observed the same thing. Okay, good. I'm sorry, our screen just went blank for a moment there. We have been in some brief initial conversations with Viola. There is a lot of sound that comes out of the power plant. And I've spent a lot of time over there. I personally don't find it intrusive. And I think the architecture of that building is pretty cool. You know, it's something that I find very interesting to look at when I'm over there. If it made less noise, we'd be thrilled about that, but I'm not sure there's much we can do about it.
And with the activation of, that side, the other side of the canal,
Yeah.
the focus is going to be on the riverfront side of the
Right.
property.
Right. I think maybe the challenge to us is design something that's so much fun to be in that you just don't even think about the fact that there's a power plant on the other side of the canal. If you've got some great ideas, or if you know somebody there,
We're all
would be,
ears.
yeah.
Charles Marquette asks, the local businesses in the area first went through years for the Longfellow rebuilding. Now COVID-19. With your project, what will you propose to support the local businesses who could be impacted by the construction of your development?
Well, we have a long way to go before we think about construction. And Dave had mentioned 3 to 5 years. That's probably the track that we're on with the things that we have to get accomplished. We've looked at how do you stage this project, and we do have some area around the buildings within which we can work. Everything would be contained on the site, certainly, and there will be trucks coming on and off the construction site that will have to manage that traffic flow very carefully. I think in terms of local businesses, what we're hoping is that with if we can activate this ground level properly and in an exciting manner, it's actually going to draw people in. One of the city councilors has suggested to us that we need to go around and inventory all the businesses in the area and see what's there so that we don't duplicate it. The point has been made that every new project that comes in promises to do one particular land use, and if they all come to fruition, then it's going to be overdeveloped from that land use. I don't think we want to compete with any of the established local businesses. As you say, it is tough in a pandemic to maintain those businesses. We'd like to supplement it, and I'd like to think that if we can draw in enough pedestrians and enough foot traffic, that everybody will do better. As we go through the permitting, and let me just talk about the permitting process, that we've got to file a petition with the city council. The city council is going to hold hearings, and if the city council is willing to rezone this project, we then have an exhaustive process to go through with the planning board for site plan approval. And in that site plan approval process, the architecture is going to be carefully vetted, and construction management is going to be carefully scrutinized, and it will be conditioned to protect all the interests that you listed in your question. So I guess the short answer is we're going to be mindful of it, and the long answer is we're going to give that a lot of very careful consideration as we file plans with the planning board.
A comment from Alex Levering. You referenced Rose Wharf as a present example, but I don't see that being achieved with a single-story pedestrian pass-through tunnel. I'd love to see a larger ground level connection in the design.
Okay. Yeah, boy, I'd love to do another Rose Wharf, but we just don't have the space for that. What we haven't really shown and what we haven't really designed, and I share your concern about that, but what we conceptually have proposed directly adjacent to that is the lobby into this new building, 51 Main Street. And that lobby will be, it'll have the height of 2 stories, but it'll be 1 story. So it's a big atrium. It's made out of glass. And the goal is to, between the lobby and between the actual open air cut through, is to create a very clear passage. And we can accomplish that somewhat with signage. And I think it's one of those things that if somebody's coming over Longfellow Bridge and walking along Main Street, we want to catch their attention. And once you go through that, or if you live in the area, you'll know all about it. So your second trip to this area, you'll know exactly how to get to Broad Canal. But I think your point is a good one. Maybe we need to have more emphasis on that facade. Keep in mind that a big part of that facade is a parking garage, so we don't have to worry about obstructing windows, and we can't make it much worse. It's very plain, and there's a facade that we can put onto the facade, screenings and awnings and ways to draw people into it. So I don't know what the solution is, but I appreciate the comment, and we'll focus on that in the future.
Charles Hines comments, Poor Man's Landing restoration would be an excellent project. It's an orphan project looking for a sponsor.
Okay, we'll
We like that idea too.
Chuck, we'll commit to that right now. And it is such an underutilized asset. And Chuck, there's another thing too, is that we don't know how we're going to do it, but we want to have a really strong connection between 1 Main Street and the Charles River. If you're a pedestrian, that's a challenge to get from our side of the roadway to the Charles River. So we've actually envisioned, creating a much more functional, safer pedestrian way that can get you from one side of the road to the other. And then, what a great thing to have at the end of that is the Poor Man's Landing, revitalized and dressed up, maybe even expanded a little bit, because make that somewhat of a destination as well.
No further questions or comments.
Okay. So I want to thank everybody for participating.
Appreciate the questions.
Yes, and we have a written copy of all these questions, and so whatever I've said tonight is not the final answer. As a team, we need to think about these things, and we'll certainly formulate more comprehensive responses. And don't be surprised if we write back to you at some point. So with all that said, we're still not seeing any more questions. So if it's okay with everybody, we'll just sign off then. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.